think the last time I had this Mass, I told you about a wedding that my pastor had, a big, fancy wedding, if you remember that story. The theme here is about weddings. I want to tell you about a wedding that I had some time back. You know, we have a lot of weddings here, usually from October to the end of April. And after that, they usually taper off because of the weather, because it gets hot, it gets humid. Now, some will venture during those months, and we'll have a few weddings during those months because they can get discounts. You know, these nice places, especially downtown, they can get some really good half prices, and, you know, there's less competition. And so some couples will do that. And I remember, this is quite a while back, a couple did that. And they planned. And the bride, you know, I'm not a psychologist, but I would venture to say she was a type A personality. She planned everything to the very last detail. She had everything under control. Everything was planned. The wedding was huge. They must have had 200 people. And the bridal party was large. And so the day of the wedding came. Everything was planned. Everything except for the fact that the air conditioning went out. And so we had to open the windows and the doors. And this was July. It was a hot, when I say hot, I mean hot. And it was humid. And when the people were coming in, all these people coming in, they were taking the program, the wedding program, and they all sat down and they were using it for fans. And you know, it was kind of pretty when you were looking out there. They looked like butterflies fluttering their wings, right? I felt bad for the wedding party, though. You know, the groomsmen, they were sweating profusely. The bridesmaids, the mascara was running. You know, the hair was droopy. You know, we got to the point where in the wedding where they exchanged the vows. Everything went okay until that point after the exchange of vows, and I looked at the groom, and he looked kind of peaked. And before I knew it, down he went. He fainted. And so, but he came to quickly. We put him on a chair, and he insisted, he was a trooper, that we will continue with this ceremony. You know, I didn't know if he fainted because of the heat or because he was nervous. He insisted that he was sick earlier on, but he stayed in that chair for the rest of the ceremony. Thankfully, I went through it quickly. There were no other dramas that took place, but they had pictures afterwards, but they didn't have many because you can imagine they weren't very photogenic. But you know, I thought about that wedding, especially as back then, but also as I was thinking about today's readings. And I thought about that old saying, you know, even the best laid plans. How does that go? Even the best laid plans of mice and men can often go awry. You know, she planned for everything, but she realized that she couldn't plan for one thing. She couldn't plan for that which she couldn't control. Today's gospel, and in fact, the two gospels for the following next 2 weeks, and for the gospel even after that, as we close the ordinary time and as we go into the first Sunday of Advent. So I'm talking about for the next following 3 weeks, and then this week as well, the theme, it's the eschatological theme that Jesus is going to be focusing on. The parables and the teachings that Jesus is going to be talking on, that's the fancy word for saying the end times. Jesus talks today and will be talking for the next 3 weeks about the end times. And there's one thing that's common about all these weeks and about all those teachings that Jesus gives about the end times. It's something that's common. about all of them. And all of them, he tells us, or maybe the fact that he doesn't tell us, that we have control. We do not have control over the end time. And in this gospel in particular, not only do we not have control, but we can't plan for it. We don't know when. It's not about control. It's not about plan. It's about being ready. It's about being prepared. Now, that may seem like semantics, but think about it. We have these wise bridesmaids. They have no control over the groom. They don't know when he's going to come. They have no idea. And so the fact that they have no control and they don't know when, they can't plan for it. And so they fall asleep, just like the foolish bridesmaids. But they're ready. They're prepared. And what distinguishes them from the foolish ones is that their lamps are full of oil. What distinguishes them is that they're wise. Jesus talks in other places about being spiritually wise. When he talks about the dishonest steward, the parable of the dishonest steward, when he tells his disciples to be as wise as serpents, but as innocent as doves. And how do we do that then? Well, it's not a passive thing. It's an active thing. Where we have God's grace fill us, the oil of God's grace fill the lamps of our souls. 4 basic ways that we regularly and consistently pray. Number 1, that we're in communication with God, that we are always praying. Number 2, that we regularly receive the sacraments, particularly the Eucharist and reconciliation. 3, that we do spiritual reading. We nourish our souls, particularly by way of Scripture, and then other ways. The writings of the saints, the lives of the saints. Those are traditional ways. Other, maybe contemporary writings that would be fruitful as well. And then finally, acts of charity, especially the spiritual and corporal works of mercy. All of these are, by the way, called the 4 pillars of the spiritual life. All of these are active ways that we can call upon and ask the Lord for His grace to come and fill us. The oil of God's grace to fill the lamps of our souls so that we too are ready and prepared for a day, for an hour we know not when. I remember reading about a young lady who was preparing for her wedding. The day before, she was talking with her priest, and she was just very, very nervous. And the priest was trying to calm her down. She said, "Look, you're going to be surrounded by all these people whom you know, who know and love you, your family and friends. And it's going to be in that church that you grew up in. And when you walk down that aisle, it's going to be that same aisle that you've always walked down with your family. So focus on that aisle.
And as you walk down that aisle, look at that altar. It's that same altar that you've received communion from when you were a little girl. And as you get closer to the end and you see your groom, focus on your groom who loves you very much. Focus on him. So focus on the aisle, focus on the altar, and focus on him. And that's what she did. And it worked. She walked down that aisle. But the congregation, they were concerned because she said it out loud over and over again to herself. I'll alter him. I'll alter him. It's not about control. It's about being ready. It's about being prepared. It's about being spiritually wise. That's what the gospel is teaching us today. Because we know neither the day nor the hour. God bless you.